Roll for Crit is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Come roll with us at patreon.com/rollforcrit. This is Roll for Crit, and you're watching our Kickstarter preview for Human Punishment: The Beginning, which is a standalone sequel to Human Punishment: Social Deduction 2.0. This one takes place in the same dystopian future wherein the world is overrun by machines, and in particular, right now, the machines are trying to infect the network with a human punishment virus. So some players will be humans, part of the Ghost Squad, and it's going to be their goal to put a stop to this, while some players may be machines, and the machines, of course, are also fighting to infect the network while humans are trying to rid it of this virus. But there are a few other factions as well. You might end up as one of the Fallen, which are this underground army that wants to take down both humans and machines, or perhaps as Legion, a strange, mysterious force that is infecting people and also going against all the other factions. And then there are the Outlaws, who no one will play as, but they're working in the background trying to take everybody else down and the entire city down with them. Each player is going to have one of these loyalties given to them secretly at the start of the game. They will also have their own unique character that has their own special abilities, as well as a unique skill tree. And as the game goes on, you will be completing elements on this skill tree, different tasks, and upgrading and enhancing your character as you go.
The game will have you mostly moving around this board and taking actions in order to try to complete your team's win conditions, or at the very least, prevent your losing conditions from occurring. Now, there are many areas along the board. The first one we're going to talk about are these sectors. There are 3 separate sectors, each of them with their own pile of these chips. One of the major goals for both the humans and machines is to take these discs over to the network. The network is where you will take these discs slowly over, store them into these tiers, and hopefully get enough of the ones for your team there in order to complete one of the winning objectives. When you gain a chip, and if it's not of a type you like, you can drop it off into the junkyard up here. But be warned, there are gray chips, and if too many gray chips end up in the junkyard, the Fallen overtake any other team as the winner. You also have the option to remove chips from there as well, so that's a way to make sure that the Fallen don't get too far ahead. Then there is the Nexus and Factory. These are mostly important in order to summon and deal with the Apex and the Deus Ex Machina, pretty much the big bads for both the humans and machines. A big thing in the center is the city. There are multiple tracks here, as you can see. You can use them to draw cards, and you can also have to keep track, though, of riding, morale, and security. If any of these hit 0, bad things usually happen, usually Outlaws winning and everyone losing. Possibly, though, the machine can win with resources hitting 0, and Legion can win if security hits 0. HQ is a place to not only upgrade yourself with some equipment, but also if you want to choose to change the leaders. At the beginning of the game, one person will be declared leader while another general. This is a place where you can vote to change that role in case you're not so sure that you agree with the leader and what team they're on. If you really don't trust someone, you can also go there to send someone to the isolation cube. This is your brig, your jail, where if there's someone you don't trust, you can send them over there, be locked up, and they really can't do much there except for try to be free. The only things you can really do is try to vote yourself out, which will probably require either you dumping a lot of resources or other people helping you. You can draw an interrogation card, which will have you try to break free by doing specific actions depending on your team's role. Or if you're lucky enough, the leader can go there and just set you free with a pardon. The other final areas are the Monolith. This is actually a really great place for those who are unsure about anything, because that's where you can get recon cards. There is a small stack of recon cards, and you get the chance to choose one of these, which can either let you see loyalty cards outside the game, what chips people have placed. It's a way to get more information on other players. And then finally, there's the Dark Net. There are programs you can get. You will start with some at the beginning. These are pretty much free actions that you can play throughout the game, depending on what the card says, and that's a place where you can get more. In case you're wondering how you're actually supposed to buy any of the things I mentioned, whether it's the weapons at HQ, recon, or programs, you will actually gain these resource cards. You actually start with a deck specific to your character. They usually have positive blue cards or negative red cards. In the terms of buying things, all you need to worry about is getting the same color to add up to whatever you need. So for example, recons need 5. You either need a total of 5 of blue or red, whether that's one card that says 5 or a 2 and a 3.
After a player has moved and or taken an action or two, depending on how many action points they have available, then you will move on to the enemy phase of the player's turn. Now is when you will roll a set of dice of different colors with different amounts of sides, and the various results of these dice are going to determine how enemies act and where new enemies will spawn. If an area is activated that has one or more enemies in it, then those enemies will attempt to attack. If a player is in range of that enemy, then they will be attacked at that time, and they are going to also have the chance to defend themselves. They will be able to play blue cards for defense from their hand, and then the enemy will also be able to add a couple of cards, or perhaps more, depending on their different stats, from the general resource deck. And based on the values of these two and what the difference between them is, the player may be taking damage from that enemy according to their strength value. This works kind of the same way in reverse if during a player's turn they decide to use one of their actions to attack an enemy that is within range of them. Only this time they will be playing red cards from their hand, and now just one card will come out from the deck that may give a boost to the enemy or perhaps weaken their defenses. Once an enemy's health has been completely removed, then they are taken out of the game, and the player will get a little reward for taking them out. The white dice then will also determine if and where enemies will be spawning. If a space already has an enemy in it, then no new enemy can appear there, but otherwise you're going to have to be wary of that. There are different types of enemies determined by the red die. They range from basic attackers to big tanks that hit a lot of people to thieves that are out there just to steal your data chips from you. After this phase is complete, then you go on to the event phase. You will draw one event card from the deck, and everybody, generally speaking, is going to have to deal with this. Often it's going to be a skill check, and this is where those resource cards from your hand are going to come into play yet again. The skill check will be asking you to reach a certain threshold either of blue or red cards. Sometimes they might even be asking for green or gray cards, which are different and have different potential uses with them. And each player is going to have the opportunity to, in turn, add a couple of cards if they want to, face down, as well as 2 random cards from the main deck. And all of those cards will be shuffled together and then revealed so no one knows exactly who may have put anything in. You're not supposed to discuss it too explicitly. And depending on what the results are, a different effect will occur. After that's finished, the next player gets to take their turn taking actions, and this continues until one of the game's end conditions is met. Most commonly, this is going to be from those tiers where you'll be putting your chips in the network area of the board. As the game goes on, these tiers are going to be filled up with chips of different colors, different team affiliations, and there will be a couple of phases where they will in fact be revealed, although their order will be randomized, and you may get some idea as to what has been played there, and maybe you can try to guess who was putting them where at what time. But once all 3 tiers are filled up, the game will end, and you will look at all of them, and then you look at each column. And whichever team has a majority of their color chip wins that column. And if a team has the majority of those columns won, that team has won the game. Other factions may be able to win through other means, such as the Fallen, who want to have gray chips in the junkyard. And then, of course, there are Machines and Legion who have various goals relating to the stats on the board or something to do with Deus, the all-powerful mech that the Machines can summon. If Deus is spawned and reaches the network, then the Machines can win that way as well. Humans will try to be fighting this by being able to put together Apex, their great defender. If Apex meets Deus, then the two will destroy each other. So that's a whole other kind of battle going on there. And then, in addition to all of that, even if your faction wins, each player also has their own personal objective. This is a secret, and the player has to complete that objective in order to win. So you may not win even if the rest of your faction did. While it is semi-cooperative, you are still at the end of the day out for yourself, and you are going to win or lose on an individual basis.
There is a lot going on in this game. It's not the most simple hit and roll games that we're used to. The board has this crazy space, all these different areas for you to go to. And even your own player board, it's not simply that you have a positive and negative power. You actually have your own personal deck that changes up a bit. And then you also have a skill tree, which there are free ways to upgrade skills, but also it'd be something similar to like when you kill an enemy, you can unlock this, which maybe allows you to do 2 actions a turn instead of 1. Or maybe carry 2 chips instead of 1, which is another big deal. So really each character can evolve differently depending on what you do and how things turn out for you.
Yes, and that'll also give you kind of a direction to go in different parts of the game if you're not sure exactly what you should be doing, or even, there's a lot of ways in this game to perhaps hide what you're doing or excuse things that you're doing that might look bad to other factions. Certainly, an obvious comparison right here is Battlestar Galactica, the board game from Fantasy Flight. And I think you'll definitely see a lot of that same spirit here. One of the biggest differences, I think, is the fact that there is no phase where loyalties are revealed until the very end of the game. You're going to be hidden that whole time. And as we said, there are 4 different factions plus 1 that is not controlled by any player. So you're never going to be quite sure exactly who is, there's always going to be humans, but is that person a machine that you don't trust? Are they maybe a member of the Fallen? They could have all kinds of different goals going on that are really going to muck things up and make it so it's not so simple to narrow down what you think is happening. There are a lot of variables at play.
Yeah, those secret goals also really help hide people's disguises. We had a human player who wanted to fail 2 of those events, and they did so early on. So made them pretty questionable throughout the game. But that's one of the things that can happen. There really isn't player elimination. You have health, but pretty much if your health hits 0, you're going to get these wound cards that trip you up until you remove them at the med center, which I forgot to talk about. And that's another thing, or you get thrown into jail. One thing that does share similar to Battlestar is there is a phase where people might change. Depending on player count, when the second tier is filled up, there's going to be a moment when the machine is going to be able to attack some people's hands, the eyes closed, you put your fist out, and they become a machine, so you're a sleeper agent. But the Legion player then does the same thing. It could possibly turn the machine player into a Legion player, which is this whole other crazy thing that can go on. And I know, Jonathan, you liked about this was that it was player choice, not just you got a card that said so.
That's right. Yes. I mean, those phases will come and some players will get more information, but you're never going to just out of the blue be told, the deck just decided you're switching team affiliations now. If that happens, it's because someone else decided they wanted you as an asset, which I think is a very different way of doing that for me at least feels a little better than it just being random fate, and it's a very different, interesting kind of thing. All those different factions are very, very unique, very interesting, in addition to the player things that you have going on, your own unique decks and things, and you have, that we mentioned, the general and the leader roles. And the leader is sort of like they break ties, make decisions. The general will control Apex if they're the general when Apex comes out. And they can also like use their general power to just destroy a bunch of enemies all at once. So that's another political aspect of deciding like, oh, do I trust them? Should we try to vote them out, or should I say we should send them to the cube? There's so many different things you can do, and we've still only just probably covered like 2/3 of really all the basic stuff that's in this game. If you like hidden role stuff and this kind of deep strategy layer, it's definitely something to look at. And I would say especially if you are a fan of Battlestar Galactica, because that game is out of print, this is probably the closest thing to that experience in terms of complexity and theme that I think is available right now, or that will be available if this is funded.
And for those of you who are completionists and really love a long story, this is not their first Kickstarter. In fact, if this game combines with their other one, there's a whole separate thing of rules of how that works, but it's really weird and funny and interesting because it's like if Deus gets destroyed, then you move certain cards. So it's the idea is like what actually happens prequel wise will carry on to the other game. So it's really weird how they made all of this just mesh together in a very fun, crazy post-apocalyptic cyberpunk world.
Yeah, so if you want to have just an epic game night, you can play them both back to back that way. A lot of crazy stuff going on. It's something that you can take a look at by following the link in our description right down below and see exactly what's going on, all the details, the tiers, expansion stuff, add-ons, all the things that are there for you to peruse and enjoy. And talk to us in the comments and let us know what you think of the game. If this is something that you are looking forward to, which faction do you side with? Are you an evil machine or a good human? Or maybe they're not evil from your perspective. I won't judge.
Until then, I'm the human Will.
And let's face it, I'm the machine. I'm Jonathan.
And this has been Roll for Crit. Catch the latest from Roll for Crit by liking and subscribing and supporting us on Patreon.
You're not a hidden traitor, are you? Come on, like us.